The agenda this week heard a harrowing story of human trafficking in Ontario, checked in on the challenges facing special education students in the province, met the second ever black NHL player, and sat down with a very brave nurse to hear about how she survived a brutal shark attack, losing a limb in the process. The agenda's Week in Review begins with Canadian Conservatives at the Crossroads. Let me read this from Michael Dentant, whom you all know, is a very fine columnist with the National Post, friend of the program's, been on numerous times, who writes, "Granddad, it's time for you to take a step back. Conservatives can't win by being the party of angry old men who shake their fists at reporters, endearing though such cantankerousness may be. This opens up the great opportunity for the Conservative Party to embrace moderate libertarianism, cutting right and left simultaneously. In the process, reclaiming the progressive mantle set aside following the Mulrooney years from 1984 to 93, and appropriating the fiscal street cred of chrétien liberalism. This is not a Frankenstein monster, for all its strangeness in the recent Canadian context. It's classic liberalism. There's evidence the party is already moving in this direction, in Parliament anyhow. The foundation is there. What's needed is a push." Fred, do you agree that's the way ahead?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that the other area where the Conservatives can really gain some ground is on a vision for Canada, a vision for a stronger Canada. The Americans are retreating worldwide. There is an opening there. Now, we can never be the United States, but we can certainly step up to the plate with more spending on the military, more aggression in fighting the horrible ideology of Islamism, and actually building coalitions within NATO and other countries to tackle some of the major problems around the world.
Sarah, is that the road ahead?
I think that we need to really go back to providing something that is inspirational, that isn't just a bunch of a coalition of voting constituencies that can take us back to power, but actually a broad-based philosophy that any Canadian can get behind, whether or not they self-identify as conservative. And for me, that is the undying belief that we have in the power and faith of the individual. If we give the individual the resources they need to participate fully in the economy, to raise a family, to succeed, to plan, to save. That's what the role of a conservative government should be on a federal level.
Where does community come into all of that?
Well, community, I think, I think we need to actually pull government out of communities so that communities can actually flourish again. I mean, that was kind of some of the thoughts of, what the welfare state has done to actual community connections and breaking down social connections. You think, well, the government's going to look after this person, so I don't need to actually be charitable or look after them. So I'm not sure how much that is actually true, but I think I do hear him grumbling. He's going to be weighing in. But I do think that there is a sense, and there's repeated studies that show that Canadians are actually less charitable than Americans. And I think part of that is because we have such an expansive welfare state. We think that somebody's already going to be out there looking after people. And sometimes there's a lot of people that just fall through the cracks because they don't know what programs are out there.
Okay, grumble away.
Well, the answer's in the middle. I mean, the welfare state...
Oh, surprising.
No, well, it is. I mean, there is something entirely noble and decent. And you mentioned Lasky. I mean, I don't think he'd be totally opposed to the welfare state, but his policies, in fact, under Bush, were proven not to work. Look, individual, and I speak as someone who takes the church very seriously, but churches can do a great deal. Religious organizations can do a great deal. By the way, Margaret Thatcher, who I think you rather revered, and you said there's no, I don't believe in community. Community is very, very important. I agree with you, but you can't remove the state. The state does things at a far grander scale. You can't provide a health service by communities helping out. The reason there is a health service, the reason we have a welfare state, is not because it was going so well before, it wasn't working beforehand. Now, I mean, what you said, I mean, it sounds good. I don't disagree with very much of it. But this column, and I think he's a wonderful columnist, by the way, but there's a difference between liberal and libertarian. Now, if the Tory party is going to be libertarian, that's a radical shift. If it really is going to be a party that looks to people like, I don't know, Hayek or Friedman or whatever, and withdraws from government, that's a radical message for the Canadian people, which I don't think they're willing to take on at this point.
Mark.
Last time I agreed with everybody. This time I think you're all wrong.
There you go.
There's two things that the Conservative Party needs to do. One, they need to build a much bigger party and do what I think Patrick Brown is doing in Ontario, which is build a party that has a member on every block in every community across the country, from every walk of life, and have a mechanism so that you can actually listen to them. What's important to your neighbors? What are they talking about? What are they concerned about? And to make that the root of their understanding of policy and where government needs to go. Secondly, this isn't about whether we should go left, whether we should go right. From the voter's perspective, there is no left and right. If you talk to a voter who isn't active in politics, doesn't read that page first in the newspaper, doesn't carry a membership card, they couldn't tell you whether the Conservatives are left or right in the political spectrum because it has no meaning to them.
They know right or wrong, but they don't
know right
left
or wrong,
right.
but they also know rich or poor, I can afford it or I can't. And where the Conservative Party has had success in Canada in the last decade, and where the NDP have had success in Canada in the last decade, is in the same space. Is talking about economics, is talking about economics that affects me at my kitchen table. It's talking about what families can afford and how you can make my life just a little bit more affordable to get by. When the NDP and the Conservatives talk in that space, when Andrea Horwath was talking about that provincially, she did well. When Tom Mulcair was talking about that, he did well. When the Conservatives talk about that, they win. When they stray off into ideology and think that everybody's left or right, they all lose.
You talked about hotel and motel rooms, and we heard in the program that we did earlier about taxis sometimes being involved. So there are these third parties, hotel owners, people who work in hotels, clean rooms, taxi drivers who may take the victims there or the clients there. Would you say, in your experience, that there are people, these third parties, that knew exactly what the heck was going on and just...
I mean, how would you not know? You've got all these men going into this hotel room and coming and going, and this little girl inside. So how would they not know that this is happening?
Do you remember when you looked at them, what you were thinking? Did you want to say something, help me?
I couldn't say anything. I wanted to, but I couldn't do anything.
You felt trapped. And you do this for how many years?
17.
17 years is your life. So 30 years old you get out of this.
I just got out in June.
In June. Tell me about the moments that were like epiphanies for you, where you were like, good epiphanies or bad epiphanies, like you're like, all hope is lost. This is my life. Or epiphanies where you're like, maybe I could get out. How am I gonna do? Did you have those moments?
I had quite a few of those moments. I think I accepted death. I was hoping that it would happen. I was too chicken to do it myself. So I was hoping that someone would do it for me, and that was the only way I could get out.
That you'd be killed.
I kept hoping that. And, but when I was 16 and I was able to tell someone what was going on, I thought at that moment that I would be out and I would be saved and I'd be taken care of, and it didn't happen.
You did manage to leave, as you said, just this past June. So you told someone, about 90, you tell someone you're 16 at the time. Am I right in my math? 2000, you told someone.
2000, yes.
And then, just this past summer, it finally happens for you. So how do you manage to escape after all these years?
It was after a really bad date, and I had been beat up really bad. And when I went to an appointment with my counselor at the time, she begged me to go to the hospital, get checked out, stuff like that. And I thought I could deal with it. I thought I could sleep it off and nothing's bad. But seeing the caring around that happen, like seeing their faces and them caring and actually truly wanting me out, and that they knew I deserved better than this, made me realize that maybe, yeah, I do.
You mean that had never happened to you before? Maybe I'm making assumptions. I'm imagining you were hurt before during these many years, abused.
Oh, yes.
Okay. No one had ever, until this point, in how you're viewing things, looked at you and said, it's time to go and you need to get to a hospital. And no one looked at you and gave you that, I think what you're saying is like that reassuring glance that I need this to be over.
I mean, people said it. But it was just said. It was kind of, you really shouldn't be doing this, or don't you think it's time to get out? But it wasn't until I saw the fear on this person's face that it was like, this person actually cares about me instead of saying what they're supposed to say. So it was a different feeling, and I think I was ready at that point.
How do you actually leave, though? Like in your head, you've made the decision, I'm done, I'm out. How do you actually escape?
Oh, it's not easy at all.
For Karishma, it was her doctor who got in touch with me and said that she had, a patient who had gone through, being trafficked and needed some support. And coming out of this is probably one of the most hardest things a woman can do, because this has been your normal for so long, and change is really, really hard. And now that the drugs are stopping, the numbing stopping, you're gonna have to face those demons, and then the pain and the healing start. And I think that's the hardest thing for these girls to journey through. So when she first came to me, she was a total disaster. Very scared of everything, very scared of people, not trusting, but wanting so badly to become normal, and not understanding that it was it's a long process.
I bet. It's been 8 months?
Yep.
9 months?
And I'm still nowhere near where I should be, like where I want to be.
Yes, want to be.
So take me through this last 8 months. Many people in your situation would suffer, you may be suffering from it, PTSD. You were a drug user, drug abuse. Are you clean?
Yes, struggling. Struggling. It's a daily fight. I mean, yes, I'm off drugs, but there's still the fight to go back, because the nightmares and the flashbacks and just day-to-day living is really hard, and it's terrifying. So there's always that little addict mind in the back of my head saying, come back, Karishma, we can help you. So
Like in a way, are you saying in some ways, some days it feels easier just to go back?
it feels easier to go back to the drugs.
Right.
I don't think I would ever go back to the sex work, ever.
This is where you were 5 years ago when this absolutely shocking thing happened. You went down to a hotel in Mexico for a friend's 50th birthday party, and on the 31st of January, you finished playing volleyball. You wade into the water, I guess, to get some of the sand off you.
Yes.
And what happened?
So just as I'm rinsing off the sand on my body, oddly enough, because I'm going scuba diving, so it's ironically that I'm getting ready for that. Anyways, I'm rinsing off the sand, and these guys on some jet skis are yelling at me off in the distance. And I'm looking around going, what's your problem? Because I'm in shallow water, you have the whole ocean. I thought they were just trying to get me to get out of their way. They seemed pretty adamant. They were yelling pretty fiercely at me in Spanish, so I had no idea what they were saying. But I put up my hand and said, okay, and turned around and started to walk back to shore. So I'm only waist deep in the water, just above my waist. And while standing there, I didn't realize that they had seen two full-grown bull shark enter the shallow waters of their resort. So the lifeguards whistled their swimmers out of the ocean, and these guys on jet skis went out to try to corral these sharks, to try to get them to go to deeper water. That warning was not passed down the beach. And I was in the water going one way as the sharks are coming another way. As I'm wading into the water, the first thing I feel is this bump.
So you did not see them?
I never saw it, never heard the Jaws theme, dun, dun, under the water, but no, I never saw anything. I didn't suspect it at all, never thought in the shallows of Cancun that this would be a threat at all. But after that bump, within seconds later, I sustained my first shark bite, which was to my left upper thigh. I'll later learn it ripped off 2 of my quadriceps and 2 of my hamstrings right down, exposing femur, just ripped it clean.
Nicole, you've got the pictures in the book that show what happened to your limbs after the attack. We're not going to show them here because the pictures are just, graphic. I mean, they're very profound. They are very profound.
Yeah.
This is going to sound like a dumb question, but when you sustained that first shark bite, you know, I've talked to other people in the past, you know, like for example, who've got shot and they didn't feel it at first. Did you feel it right away?
I did not feel it. I'm sure I felt something. I don't recall feeling any pain at all. My body went instantly into fight or flight mode. And although I never saw the sharks, as soon as that ocean started to fill bright red with my blood, I knew what it was. I knew immediately.
And did you feel the second bite?
The second bite was a bit more traumatic because the leg I couldn't see. It was just bright red, and all I was thinking in my head was sharks like blood. I need to get out of this water. So I started to pull myself to shore, you know, walk walked ashore, not realizing the damage beneath the water. But the shark came back and swallowed my entire arm in its mouth. So its eyes are up here and its bottom jaw is down here, and it's halfway out of the water and it's thrashing, trying to take me down. So I'm face to face literally with the shark, and that's terrifying, as anyone that's watching can imagine. So it was just, I didn't feel anything, it was total shock, and then instinct kicked in.
And what did that mean? You punched it.
I punched it, yeah. My good hand right here, and I hit it right in its nose and pulled my arm out. It's probably caused more damage than not, but.
Let's bring the picture up. This is what you look to your left and that's what you saw.
That's what you see.
Any clue how big the shark was that attacked you?
They say it was anywhere from 6 to 8 feet, which is about the average size of a full-grown bull shark. And bull shark are vicious sharks. They, great whites are called like I don't know how they word it in the book, but that they're known for killing, but it's nothing compared to a bull shark and their aggressiveness.
When you punched it in the nose, what happened?
It let go.
It did, eh?
It let go. It finally decided, that's it. I'm not gonna mess with her anymore. And I don't know where that instinct came from. I think it came from scuba diving, where we learn eyes, nose, gills, and I think that's where it came from. But I'm just very lucky that it came to mind and I reacted.
You know the stats though in this, right? You are more likely to die from a lightning strike or from a spider or from a dog than from a shark.
Yes.
And yet here you are attacked by a shark. Having said that, this past year, we're going to bring a graphic up here because this past year was the biggest ever for unprovoked shark attacks, according to the International Shark Attack File. Do you have any sense of why that shark decided to attack you at that moment in shallow water?
I tasted really good. No, I'm sorry.
You've got a sense of
I have
humor
a sense
about
of
all
humor.
this.
I do. There are many theories that I've heard of since this. I've been drawn into the shark world since this attack, and many theories. But the number one theory is that particular area was a breeding ground for sharks. And when the hurricane came and took the reef and the beach out, they dragged sand to rebuild this, thus destroying their breeding ground. So these sharks, they're guessing a pair of sharks was coming in to mate and was threatened. So they were aggressively being hit by these guys on jet skis and being pushed in my direction. So they collided with me, wondering, is this part of the assault that we're enduring? They were agitated. It's so rare, as you said, that sharks attack, and I don't want anyone to be discouraged from going into the water because of my story. It's just, you should go in the water, you should enjoy. If there's sharks around, they usually will swim away and not bother with you. Just make sure no one's hitting them.
It's important when you have a fundamental right like this. This is a human right. It's guaranteed by the Human Rights Code. Every person has a right to equal treatment without discrimination because of disability, and that includes a duty to accommodate students with disabilities. Now, the problem is that our school system has been designed for decades on a false and unfair premise. Back in the 70s and afterwards, it was based on the idea that there are two kinds of students. Normal students, they don't use that word anymore, but they did for years, and then exceptional students. Normal students are the ones for which schools are built, teachers are trained, curriculum are designed, gym equipment is bought, and so on. Everybody else is an exceptional student. If you can't benefit from a system of education that wasn't designed for you, if you have a disability so that you can't get into school or can't read the books or don't learn the way others do, then you're considered an exception. And then you get what's called special education. Even the terminology is in some ways pejorative and troubling.
Can I just understand this, though? Exceptional, when you use that word, I don't know, in my head, when I hear exceptional, I think unusually good. That's not what they mean?
Well, oddly, it actually covers both those who are super bright, gifted kids and those kids with a physical, mental, sensory, intellectual, or learning disability who are not part of this bogus paradigm of, quote, normal. Now, again, they don't use the word normal, but they do use the word exception and exceptionality and so on. So the problem is that for years, our schools were built, our programs were designed to only meet the needs of the mainstream. The other kids had to do a rearguard battle to get in, and so they need school education accommodation. But the accommodations they get are a committee that can only decide on placement It can only make recommendations which are not appealable and no one needs to follow on program or services. There are narrow appeal rights from there. And 10 years ago, the Human Rights Commission said that this system is too sluggish, it grinds parents down, and it's not effective and fair. Similarly, and it's the regulations which were passed more recently provide that schools have to provide each special education student with what's called an individual education plan. Now, that's a good idea, but it's totally up to the school what they give you or don't give you. And if you don't like what you get, your only legal recourse is to go file a human rights complaint against the school board, go to the Human Rights Tribunal, and battle the very school board that is there to meet your child's needs.
And presumably that costs a lot of money.
Well, it costs you a lot of money, and the school board dips into the taxpayer's pocket to pay for lawyers to throw at you.
Jackie Robinson breaks the color barrier in Major League Baseball in 1947, but then a few months later, Larry Doby comes along. So it's only a few months between the first and the second. In the National Hockey League, Willie O'Ree, of course, breaks the color barrier in the 1950s with the Boston Bruins, but then you don't come along as the second black player in NHL history for another 16 years. Why do you think that was?
First of all, there's a lot involved as far as talent, as far as your abilities to handle situations. You know, you have to be able to multitask. You got to be able to handle the rough stuff. You got to be able to put the biscuit in the basket, as they say. And you have to be able to, be capable of going, forward and working with the aggressive parts of things. If the gloves come off, you have to handle that. It takes someone very different and unique to be able to hear negativity on a regular basis and not let it affect them.
How did it not affect you?
Oh, you would have a moment where you would maybe, when you were by yourself, you'd have a tear. That sort of thing would go on. You're a young man, and the pressure of trying to perform at your best. But for a lot of people, that would just make them quit. At that stage, they'd say, well, I don't want to do this anymore. That's all there is to it.
Why didn't you?
I don't know. I was hungry for something. I remember back in the day with my Uncle Romeo and my dad sitting watching hockey, and they would throw the pillows at the television when the Leafs were playing if a goal was scored. And I remember the first time we all watched Willie O'Ree. And I said to my Uncle Rome and my dad, I want to do that. I want to be a hockey player. So it meant whatever I had to sacrifice, that's what I had to do in order to get there.
And it didn't matter what they did to you in the NHL? Because I imagine some guys, there must have been some fights that you had. I mean, you were in junior hockey 150 minutes a year in the penalty box, right? You could fight.
There were situations, but, people ask me that question all the time. I'm out with friends or whatever. The thing is, it was 40 some odd years ago. And my feeling is that everybody evolves. So who you were at 21 or 22 or 25, I have to think that they've become enlightened, that they see life a little different now that they're 60 whatever or 70. Some would be 70. And so I don't see the point in bringing that up in a negative way to make a guy to point a finger and say, you called me whatever, blah, blah, blah. I don't see the point.
I hear what you're saying, but you know what, I remember back then. I've been going to hockey games since the mid-1960s.
Right.
And, French-Canadian players were on the receiving end of racism.
That's right, yeah.
So you got to think the only black kid in the league is going to face his fair share of it, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what, again, I guess I wonder how you manage to sort of put that in its place and still play the game.
You got to be, there's a kind of place you have to go to in your mind where you refuse to be beaten. You refuse to give up. And you just do the best with what you got that day. Sometimes you're going to be plus, sometimes you're going to be minus. But you just keep going. Every time you get knocked down, you get back up on your feet and you roll.
And that is the Agenda's Week in Review. You can see all of those programs in their entirety. They're on our website at tvo.org, on our iTunes channel, or on the YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.